All right, welcome to this week's episode of Courageous Leaders Changing the World. This week's episode is Miroslav Bardović.
Thank you for having me, Cody.
Great to have you here. We're going to have some fun.
Yeah,
One of my closest friends, so.
I'm here for the fun.
Great. So the name of the podcast is Courageous Leaders Changing the World. What's the time in your life where you had to summon more courage than any other time throughout your life?
That's a good question. Do you want the story or the moment?
Whichever.
I think one of the most prolific moments that comes to mind is telling my mother I loved her.
Yeah.
And even though love was never hidden in our family, it was freely expressed, it was a very different thing voicing that. And there was a lot of fear. After I said it, I was shaking. It's like, okay, this is big.
And what did it take for you to be able to bring that forth? Why was it such a big thing?
So let me put the story into context. I've given away what's going to happen, but the context just helps.
Yeah.
So she was going for a cancer journey at the time, and we would drive her to the hospital. And on this particular occasion, we're in Melbourne, South Yarra. You're stuck behind trams. It's very slow-moving traffic. And her and I started getting into an argument. And she, we're kind of going at each other a little bit. And then it kind of turned up a bit. And she goes to me, she used to call me Mickey. She goes, the problem with you is that you don't care about anything. And I was like, right, we're on. I'm like, well, the problem with you, Mum, is you care about everything too much. And she got upset. She went very quiet and folded her arms and pulled over and started looking out the window. And I was ready to keep arguing. I was like, okay, I'm amped up for this. You're in the car. We were in the car. The energy is really compressed. And it's like, I got ready to drive because she was ignoring me now. And I'm like, well, there's nowhere to go. I'm just stuck behind the tram. And I felt all the bubbling inside of me. And I was like, I could keep arguing, but I don't actually know how much time I've got left with her. And I asked myself this question: what's unexpressed? Like, what really wants to be expressed here? Because this fighting is covering up something deeper. And as soon as I said it, and I still remember my hands were around the steering wheel, and the answer came up straight away. And I couldn't even look at her. I was like, no, I'm not saying that. And we stayed. It was only another 3 minutes to the hospital, but that 3 minutes in bumper-to-bumper traffic felt like 20 minutes because of how much tension there was. And we pulled up in front of the hospital, and there was a thing inside me that was like, if you don't say this now, you might not get a chance to say it again. Like, the moment was so precious and poised, and I was like, whatever I'm holding on to, I have to let it go. And I turned to her, and she was like, thank you for driving me. And she went to go out of the car, and I was like, Mum, wait. Took a deep breath, and she was like, yeah, what is it? I'm like, I need to say something to you. And she's like, okay, well, you can say it. And I'm like, no, we need to go outside. So this is already very dramatic. We don't do stuff like this in my family. And I walked out to the front of the car, and she came around from her side, and I put my hands out for her to hold them. And I go to her, hvala ti što si me rodila. Drago mi je što sam tvoj sin. Thank you for giving birth to me, and I'm glad I get to be your son. And I was shaking inside when I said it and offered the words. And, she said thank you, and she really received it, and she walked off. And I turned back to sit in the car, and I'm like, there was so much fear and adrenaline, and you could even call it bliss running through my body that I couldn't feel anything. I was like, I don't even know if I have legs right now. And I went to drive, and I just remember this feeling of wow, this was big. Something has fundamentally changed inside me after this has been expressed. And it was beautiful that afterwards, she mentioned this to me, when she was on her deathbed, that, that was such an important moment for her. It's I walked through the hospital with these, white lights, and the stripped kind of atmosphere of the hospital is just with a heart full of joy after having received that from you. So, yeah. I don't know what your question was, but I hope that
It's perfect. I love that story from you. It's, whenever I hear it from you, I hear a different version. So it's beautiful because we both have the same experience with our mothers. And
it's funny you said, let's go deep. So we started here. What's next, Cody?
I think the next question then is what's the thing that's forcing you to face off with bringing more courage out in your life right now?
That's a good question. A desire to be intimate with life. And to put that into perspective, so I just mentioned this to you briefly, but when we were chatting beforehand, I just finished the conference. One of the questions was, what can you do to energize your business in 2025? Everyone had great takeaways. And I was like, guys, my one's rest. I need to rest to energize my business. And people were giggling, but they felt it as well. And I was like, here's the thing. I'm about to have a child in 6-ish weeks, and I want to be fully present for this child. And I want to see, like, I dreamt about it a couple of nights ago, and I'm like, I just want to be with its eyes. Like, I want to be present while this is happening, and I can't do that doing the headless chook thing I can easily get into inside my business. And that thing is more important to me than anything else, because there's a part of me that my childhood got robbed because of the war. And I'm like, I don't want to miss out on this with my own child. It's like it's an experience for me to be in the intimacy of that. So it's like that sense is more precious to me than anything else. And if I have to be courageous to have that and do things I wouldn't, or say things I wouldn't, or say no to things I wouldn't have, it's like that still has to be more precious than, anything else that shows up in life.
I love that. Tell us more about that transition from, coming from a war-torn country and coming all the way to Australia.
I mean, early on, it was a lot of social anxiety, a lot of not speaking. I remember spelling my name when I was in prep, and I could already spell. Like, my parents taught me how to read and write Serbian, and English wasn't that much of a transition. And I remember writing my name, and the person next to me going, "No, that's not how you spell Mickey." I used to be called by Mickey. Like, I enrolled as Mickey in primary school, and I didn't change that until like my uni days. So when it came time to me to get my VC, the graduation certificate, I was still enrolled under my nickname. And I mean, that's kind of a reflection of how I lived. It was like, it's too awkward to express myself, so let's just go with whatever's happening. And I remember saying, I'm like, no, I couldn't even say this is how you write my name. She rewrote my name how she thinks it should be, and I just accepted that. I was like, okay. And it's funny, that little moment probably captures the next, 15, 20 years of my life. It's just like bowing down to whatever was happening because I didn't have the courage to speak up or to say what needed to be said. I mean, that's some of it. That's a bigger topic. Like, which direction do you want to go in with all of this?
Any direction that you want. What's the direction that's the most of an edge for you?
I think coming back to my childlikeness. Like these words I just spoke before, when I spoke them yesterday around wanting to be present with my child so I could re-experience a childhood I missed out on. Like, I teared up and I started crying in a corporate-ish kind of event, to recognize that this, is more important than chasing the next barometer of success. Like, this is what success looks like at this stage. It's like, can I be fully present for the intimate moments that are happening in my life?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely been brought to the forefront of me. In the last week I've had a bit of food poisoning. So it was, forcing me to slow down and, become present so much more. And it was just in between the trips to the toilet, very heart opening and mouth and butt opening at the same time. Everything was open. Not everything by choice.
I'm curious to ask you on this same question. Like, what is it for you that fatherhood has given you that you didn't have access to before?
So many things. Like, if we just look at like the spectrum of business, it's just like how do I put it? It's like this deeper sense of like knowing and commitment, but also like focus. Because what happens is, like, when you don't have kids, like, what happens is you're just like, oh, like, I've got all this time to be able to do it. Oh, I'll just keep going until I'm done. It's like, well, no, you keep going until the child is like screaming, and then you've got a break. And it just forces you into, it creates all of these constraints for you that you start to work within, but that previously you didn't have. And that forces you just to become so much better at everything that you do, and so much more discerning with everything that you do. It's like all of those things that were like great before and they felt great. It's like now you're just like, is it worth it?
I love this.
Is it worth my time? Is it worth my energy? Is it worth me actually taking this person into this container knowing that, you know, I'm going to be going home after this event to my child? So it's that ultra level of like discernment, knowing the knowing piece is like, it's like knowing that I'm a parent, I know that I can fucking do anything in business. Parenting, you know, that I talk about this a lot, you know, when people work with us. It's like, you know, there's a season of like initiation in business, there's a season of initiation with your family, and then one with like a relationship. Like most people, they're like, oh, I want to be initiated in business. But a lot of the times, as soon as you become a father, it's like, well, you're going to have growth in business, but the initiation is going to be in parenting. And people want to change where they're being initiated rather than actually like being in the initiation that they're in that moment and actually having the flow-on effects to every other area. So for me, it's been very much like just getting more present to everything. And that was one of the things, like, even as you're saying that, I'm like, yes, this is more father Miroslav right now than I've been hearing. It was good. Like just those slight little subtle tweaks of what kind of plays out when we're stepping into parenthood. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like it. And I really like this theme you're speaking to, which is like efficiency, essentially. You know, there's so many ways to get efficiency from a logical coaching perspective, and you'll like just become a father.
Yeah.
it's gonna force you into efficiency.
Yeah. Yeah. Like things that would like, you know, take 5 hours or something. Sometimes if I'm on dad duties and Max is asleep, it's like you've got 2 hours.
Yeah.
2 hours and then he's gonna be awake. So you got to get in and get it done. Everything else, as soon as he's awake, game over. It's like you might be able to get little things here and there. You might be able to respond to a message, but anything like creative, it's like, no, that's gone. That season's over. Now you got to be so much more disciplined, focused, and discerning.
And if we were to just play with this thread for a moment, do you think, like, what has having Max brought back into your business? Like, is there a sense of creativity or different energies that have come back?
I think it's been such a different flavor of creativity. Like previously, my creativity has been like in this outlet over here, but then it's over here so much more. The creativity has definitely shifted where it is, but I think that's probably the same, but definitely more play. There's so much more play, so much more joy, so much more of the dance with it rather than, you know, the seriousness of it. Or when was it? Can't remember when it was, but basically I was with Kezia and she found out what my shadow is in Gene Keys or whatever, and it's like seriousness, and she just like literally lost it. She's like, "That's your fucking life," and I'm like, "Yes, it is. Thanks."
But you didn't need Gene Keys to tell you that.
Yeah,
I've probably got the same Gene Key.
That's why we get along. We trauma bond and same shadows. So. Yeah. Where was I going with that?
The creativity.
Oh, yeah, the creativity. Creativity, yes, but more play. There's like just so much more play, so much more joy, so much more ease as well. So, like you stop trying to force it. Like when it has to be efficient, then it's not actually efficient. It's like, well, it actually becomes efficient when you actually just fucking let go, when you actually just go with the energy, when you actually just have a screaming child, and instead of just being like, 2 more minutes, you just pick up the child. It's just like, okay, cool. Well, that's where the energy is. The energy's over here. The energy's moving over here. Let's move to that. And then, you know, I can do this much easier than Jackie. Like she will, she wants more time to be able to like finish work and things like that. And Max is just like not having a bar of it.
Yeah, he's
but I
timeline.
But I know that as soon as I give him like 15 minutes of attention, he doesn't want me anymore. So then it's back to like another 15 minutes of me. So it's just like if I'm absolutely clearly present with him more than anything else in the world for that time, then he just has enough. He's like, this is amazing. Yeah, daddy, let's play together more. And then eventually it's just like, all right, see ya. And I'm like, all right, thanks. Over here.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. So it's definitely initiation. And, you know, that's one of those things that I recognize. It's like, well, what is the initiation that we're facing off with? What is that initiation that we're potentially resisting as well? Because, you know, stepping into fatherhood for me, there was definitely like layers of resistance of moving through that, especially like such a weird experience to explain to people that haven't been through it yet. It's just the same as business when you think about it though, because it's just like you start and you're like, oh my God, I've started the thing. This is amazing. And then it's like, oh no, now it's actually just begun. Now it's begun. Now in business, I'm learning how like all of the things that I'm going to mess up. And the same thing like happens in parenthood. It's just like you start in the initiation and then you recognize, oh, this is getting harder, not easier. It's getting harder because as they start to grow and evolve and the more moving parts that are occurring in either the business or with the baby, it's like, oh, there's more things that can go wrong. There's more things that can mess up. Now it's actually calling on more of me. You know, a 2-year-old is 1,000 times harder than a 6-month-old or a 1-year-old or even an 18-month-year-old. Like, it's the same. It's hilarious. It's like the same in business. It's like a small business. It's like, you know, $10,000 a month. It's like, you know, there's only little things going on. But as soon as you start to have all these extra pieces, $200,000, $1 million, there's all of these pieces that are moving. All of these things can go wrong. And then it's just your ability to be able to tolerate that, expand your capacity to be able to just be with that on an even deeper level, even though all of the things are, you know, falling apart or imperfect. So I think it has definitely...
Imperfect, whole and complete.
Imperfect, whole and complete. Perfectly imperfect. It's definitely been that initiation for me and the ongoingness. And, you know, I think it was like Hormozy or someone said, it's like, you know, you want to be rich, then just do what statistics say. I don't think he said one of them, but I'll add it in because it's another stat. It's like, the more children you have, the more money you make. So it's like you look at...
I know Clint Morgan has mentioned that one a few times.
Yeah, yeah. Like the more children you have, the more money you make because you've got to make more money because they're expensive. The next piece is the more you go to church. I don't think Hormozy said that one, but that's another one. It's like statistically, people who go to church make more money. They make better... They have statistically better relationships. And what was the third one? More kids, more children.
Is there statistics on which churches are highest performing?
No, it's just church because it's just like,
it's a community vibe.
It's a community. It's like, you know, when you think about it, I like to study church as a business model as well. This is Jackie rolls her eyes every time we go into like a cafe or anything because my mind works as I analyze the entire profitability of the business, how the table turnover is going. Even if I go to church, it's like I'm going to analyze the profitability of this church. I'm going to look at how are people coming into the church? How are they staying? What is the ascension model within the church? Do they actually have these, you know, they've got Sunday Mass. That's one part of it. But then do they move on to the group things?
Customer experience happening.
Yeah. And you look at, you know, the mega churches in the States, they're a huge billion-dollar business. And for me, it's just starting to recognize that. Again, I have no idea where I'm going.
I don't know. But I do remember at one point I was doing Joe Dispenza meditations regularly.
Yeah.
Not my favorite practice, but in this particular time I was. And whenever I was kind of casting out the desires and where I wanted my life to go, I kept seeing myself holding a baby.
Yeah.
And it was like this accepting not even accepting, it was like giggling at my resistance of being like, I know already that my life is like, okay, this is what's next. You need to move towards this. And it's like, yes, you might have these desires, but this, you know, it's just like, here it is. And it was beautiful to just like see and experience the same thing coming up over and over with some mental resistance. It's like, oh, this is scary. It's unpredictable. I'd never logically had this desire. And at the same time, this is the doorway to my biggest desires. And now as I'm stepping closer towards it, like it is, and it's touching the parts of me that I haven't been able to touch with all the things I've done, you know, all the coaching, the self-work, the meditation. It's like, no, I can't get back in there. It's like, here's the pathway if you actually want it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I was on a podcast a little while ago and someone's like, all right, so what's the most life-changing experience you've ever been through? And I was like, having a child. And they're like, what's the second most? Because they want me to get to the like the coaches and stuff that I work with. And I'm like, being in a relationship.
It's real life things, yeah.
Yeah. It's like coaching supports you in life, but also live your life.
Yeah.
That's like a big thing for people, because otherwise they just get lost in all of the personal development. It's just like one thing after the other. It's like, well, what are you doing that for?
Yeah, and I think there's also an overlooking of how, like, sometimes people are like, oh, I don't know what a spiritual path is, or I'm not on one. I'm like, no, you are. You might not have a relationship to it.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it's like it flips over, and especially for people that get stuck on the spiritual personal development train, it's like you just need real life.
Yep.
Like your next ayahuasca journey is going to make 50 sales calls.
Yep.
And you get 50 rejections, that's been the initiation. You know, it's like just be with life as you do that.
Yep. Yeah. And that's one of the things that, I try and bring forth. It's like, how do we have, our spiritual life and our business life intersect? How do we actually bring those things together? How do we use our business or our relationship to be the thing that actually evolves who we are as a person, that deepens our relationship to spirit, if we call it that, or whatever we call it? How do we actually just bring all of those things together so that that can just be our life, not, spiritual life, business life, family life? It's like we want it to be life. So,
have you read German author, tiny little book? It's like 80 pages. I want to say Hans Zimmer, but that's the composer, not the author. Don't know if you.
I've listened to Hans Zimmer, but I don't know the book you're talking about.
Herman Hesse. Siddhartha is the book.
Yeah, you gave it to me, remember? You told me to read it, and I was reading it when we were going through Egypt, remember? Because you're like, oh my God, this book's amazing. And I'm
Did you think it was amazing?
I don't think I rated it as highly as you. It was good.
Yeah, cool.
So I'm trying to remember. So it's ends up being the Ralph guy.
Yeah, the Ralph guy, yeah. But I mean, for me, it's like, it starts off with this guy like yearning for spirituality and doing all the spiritual things and recognizing that didn't work.
Yeah.
And all the people claiming to have had the spiritual things were just teaching stuff. They weren't actually embodying the essence of the message, which I mean, paint a stroke over the personal development industry and the spiritual development industry as well.
Yeah.
And, he goes on his journey, he builds a business, he has a family, and in the end, like, he finds the truth of what he's yearning for, doing the most mundane job where no one would even notice him. Like the beauty and the simplicity of life.
Yep. How important do you think authenticity is for people to be able to live the life that they yearn for?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it depends how we define authenticity. And I'm going to start this question by saying sometimes people say to me, like, I presented on this in front of 200-300 speakers on Monday. And then I heard someone say this comment, like, that authenticity thing, I've got that. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't get authenticity. Like, authenticity is a continual relationship to life as it's moving through you. And it's a continual leaning in to keep saying yes to that. And for me, like, that's an ongoing relationship. And I'm like, I get that you can say I've got it if you're regularly doing that. But it's like it's always going to us. For me, the experience, and this might be different for everyone. It's usually going to ask me to offer up my identity to it, because the identity has had this level of safety, who I've been, and then it's like, oh, now authenticity is like you need to have a child, and that wasn't on Miroslav's old, vision board. I've never made a vision board in my life, but let's just call it that. So I think what it is like the bowing down to our internal desires, which we have no control over. And to be authentic is like not to drive at what the society wants, but it's like what's authentically arising inside me, and can I lean in towards that? And the success and the fulfillment looks very different from that place. And often, I mean, this is a crazy story. I remember being at a festival a long time ago, and being in a bit of an altered state at this festival, as you do. Maybe one of my first experiences being in an altered state. And I just had this like really stark realization that if I want what I want in life, which for me was enlightenment in that moment, you can call it the truth, just like really knowing the essence of life, it was like, you're going to have to disappoint your parents. And that was big. Like, that was really confronting. I'm like, whoa, you mean I can't have both? And it's like, no. Like, if you want to live inside the image of what's going to make them happy, you won't have what you want in this lifetime. And it's confronting because, on some level, those things are really embodied around who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to be for our parents. So to bring it back, I'm like, I think authenticity is living an actually fulfilling life, as opposed to just going ahead with, what we've been, some idea or image of what we have as what life should look like.
So what do you say to someone when they do say that though? When they say, like the person said in the audience, they're like, "Oh, I've got that."
I don't really say anything. I'm like, what's the Karate Kid's thing, when he says like young grasshopper or something? Yeah, it's just this sense of like, okay, it's like you'll find in your own time. And I can see how, I had a mentor that used to say things to me about myself, and I'm like, I don't really see that. And then a year or two later, I'll come back and I'll be like, yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah.
It's like you could see it way before I could. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing, It's sometimes people are so attached to, who they've been that they, anchor back into that unconsciously to be able to keep things the same, to be able to keep things safe, to be able to keep things comfortable, to be able to avoid, what is facing off with that next initiation. Yeah.
I was just going to say, like, one of the things, I've done a lot of attunements with people, like when I get them on stage. What comes to mind is the moment at Mindvalley where I got that guy on stage. He'd done a bunch of speaking. He was very confident on stage. And we did the attunement, like, for the listeners, an attunement is like when I get people to speak, we do a couple of shifts and I get them to speak again. And the second time he spoke, like, he really captured the whole room. Everyone was like, whoa. He found it really scary to do the second bit. But I love what he said afterwards is he goes, I had no idea that was in there. I'm like, that is authenticity to me. It's like, how much deeper can we go than the story we've been living inside of? And I think on some level, like, yes, reflective practices help, like whatever you need to tune into yourself. But I think there's a huge support in community and peers to keep us in relationship to that. And it's not pointing, it's more like just being a reflective space to ask,
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think that's like, the starting point is that willingness to be to reflect and to look inward. But then also, there's always going to be those pieces that you can't see. There's always going to be those pieces that, are blatantly obvious to everyone else that are just, right under your nose that you don't even see. What do you feel is the one thing that blocks people the most from stepping into authenticity then?
Fear, disguised as some kind of internal narrative. So when you can recognize fear and feel fear, I think that's when it's easier to step through it. If you have a relationship, the problem is fear doesn't always show up as that.
Yeah.
It shows up as, that's just not me. I'm not into that. No, I don't want to do that. I've already learned that, and I'm like, even with my work, I've had people say that. And I'm like, what I'm hearing sometimes in the subtext is you're actually terrified of what's going to happen if you take this step. And, and it's okay. And sometimes you just internally smile and it's like, okay. Yeah, I'm like, I could say more, but I don't know. Do you want to add anything?
No. Say more.
Where my mind goes is a while ago, I read this book about when Hinduism first came to the West, and people in the West couldn't understand why in the East they would worship Shiva, who they coined as a god of destruction. Like, why in the world would you worship that? And for me, it's like there's this relationship with life and definitely with the spiritual path. If we're willing to look inside, all the old bits are going to start falling off. And that is destruction. And it's terrifying. Like, the process of allowing this to fall off is going to evoke fear. And sometimes it's going to evoke bliss and love. And that can be a terrifying experience when you start feeling more bliss and love than you've ever felt before. So, I don't know. There's some more words for you, Cody.
Thank you. How do people start to, develop more trust in themselves to be able to move through that then? Like, we're very much talking courage, fear. All courage and fear are intertwined, but also then like trust and facing with all the betrayals, like the next piece that comes up for people as they start to, either bring forth more courage or run into that fear.
Yeah, what I advise like clients and students to do is to recognize that when they're expressing something, they're not just speaking to one person. So if I'm speaking to one person, it's like I know you as Cody, and I know there's a established relationship and there's a trust and a history and stuff. And often, especially when it comes to more intimate relationships with family, like the story I said about my mother, that completely changes the experience between us if something like this is voiced. And what I invite people to do is consider this speaking to life. So when it's just one person, we can easily get into, will this person love me? How is this going to change the relationship? And when I consider it as I'm speaking to life, it's like it's important for me to express this to life. And yes, life is going to change and adapt with that being spoken. And can I be okay with that? And like to put this into a practical way that commonly comes up, like expressing to someone you love them, especially in a romantic sense, or even that you have an interest in someone, it's like it brings up the judgment that will they like me back, blah, blah, blah. And like for me, approaching that moment with Victoria, who's now my wife, so just for context, she was in the back of my mind for about a year and a half while I was in a different relationship. And I recognized that relationship had to end because I had to move towards this. And Vic and I had different values. And I was like, I don't know if this is going to be a relationship. And I'm leaving a relationship that was functioning, was only getting better with time because of the authenticity was like, you have to move towards this. And I was letting go of everything I had that felt safe and comfortable to move towards this. And I also had to accept this might not work out at all. And if it doesn't, can I be okay with that? And where I got to was, regardless of how she responds to this and regardless of what happens, I'm expressing this to life. And if I'm honoring this desire that's been deeply held inside me to life, even if it doesn't show up with this person, it's been expressed. It's like as an algorithm, I've written a new part to the algorithm and life's going to come back sooner or later to respond to that.
Life is an algorithm.
Life is an algorithm, yeah.
So when people are facing off with that, like how do they start to create more trust in their communication then?
Well, I think it's partially like trust in what. My first piece would be just like have the courage to feel the fear and the discomfort, like get comfortable with that being an experience in your body. Secondly, I would say let go of outcomes. And what I just said before was an invitation of how you can let go of the outcome. Recognize you're not looking for a specific result with this person. You're expressing it and you're being open to what happens after that. And that takes a bit of self-inquiry. It's like you have to see what the outcomes are that you're holding unconsciously. And I think the trust is essentially just a choice to say yes. And I think after those two first bits, it almost comes naturally of like, okay, if I'm going to live authentically, this is what life looks like for me.
How do you support people to be able to get to that point then? So it's like they're right on the edge of recognizing what it is, but they haven't gotten to that point of like full commitment of like saying yes to that choice then. Because, I recognize many times throughout my life where it's like, I know what I'm going to do, but then there's a long gap between it. We're talking about it, like business example is like starting this podcast again. It's like, it's been there for a long period of time. And then it's just like, okay, cool. You just got to get to that start point. A personal example is like, we're in Estonia and I recognize, I'm going to ask my partner to marry me, even though that's not been a conversation that we've said was going to happen. We've said the opposite for a long period of time. And then it's like, still a few months afterwards is that the fruition of that. There's how do we start to shorten the recognition of like the time of like, okay, cool, I know this is the path, and then taking that path.
Honoring the step, yeah. I think this is a great question. Yeah. And I think that sense of like how can we close the gap is really important. And I think like there's something to be said about timing. It's like it gets louder and bigger, and it's like, okay, I can't keep suppressing this. And I think time will do that one way or another. But I also think for me, there's a big driver in the dreams that are deepest and closest to my heart. I want to experience them while I'm alive. And that's the deeper driver. And it's like, if I've already got clarity on something and I can feel that's where the fear or the inspiration is, it's like, what am I waiting for? I just quoted Leonard Cohen at the end of my talk yesterday. And I'll share this little story because I think it's beautiful. So for anyone that doesn't know, Leonard Cohen was deeply spiritual and also an absolute genius when it came to music. And on his last book, The Flame, his son wrote the foreword, and it was published posthumously. So his son had to compile the rest of it after Leonard left his body. And he says something like, no matter how much writing my father did, he still didn't feel it was enough. And you would come over to his house and you'd find or you'd open the freezer and you'd find notepads with books in it with half-written poems. And this was everywhere. And he's he never used the fancy books people gave him. It was always on handkerchiefs and anything he could pick up, he would write poetry on. He devoted his life to it, so much so that his final couple of years, he just emailed everyone and said, apart from those closest, I'm not even going to be in connection. And I think he said something like, please reach out to me for email. Because he just wanted to devote his time completely to what wanted to be written through him while he was still alive. And I'm this is someone that's already been living as a writer and a musician their whole life. And what it means to be that deeply in service to the expression that's flowing through us. And I'm for a lot of us, unless we're willing to lean into that, are we ever going to get to that point? And even for someone like Leonard that lived it, there was still so much towards the end that wanted to be expressed. So I think that kind of hangs for me at the back of my mind of okay, this might be scary, but I'd rather do it now and have more time to live inside of it than be at my deathbed thinking, fuck, I should have done this and I should have done that. Or even I should have done that earlier. I mean, there is no earlier at that stage. It just is the time you did it. But I think it's definitely a driver for what do I want to be experiencing while I'm alive.
It's definitely that dance as well. It's that dance of that timing piece. It's the paradox of the opposing energies of there's the timing of it, of getting things to kind of line up, but then also recognizing that I think it's that recognition when you're using timing as the excuse. It's oh, it's not the right time. It's the right time to be able to, bring forth more of you and start the journey is now, always. And it's interesting to see it like that. There's definitely, decisions and choices that have been very specifically timed throughout my life. And then there's other times where I recognize, I was fucking around for a long period of time.
Completely.
Yeah.
And it can be scary. And I think that's part of the human condition. It's okay. And I think other times as well, just having the right kinds of support, I know for me, when the fatherhood piece came up, it's okay, I can see that this is definitely the next thing. I can see I'm scared of it and I'm not ready for it now. And my internal feeling became a prayer of can I, give me the blessing of feeling the desire for this? Can I find the desire? And that meant speaking to you, speaking to Vu, having these conversations with men in my life to, I guess, move through some of those layers so I could fully step into that decision without pushing it away and just saying I need more time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important as well. I didn't recognize it as much until hindsight. I was talking to Vu about it when he was about to have his child. And I didn't even, he's I remember exactly where I was when I heard what you said. And I was like, what did I say, bro? What did I say? Sounds good. And he's just well, I asked everyone else and you gave me this one extra piece that no one else had given me. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And until he said that, I didn't recognize how important it was for so many people to be able to hear just those little pieces as well. It was just a piece of, the relationship dynamic changes. It's instead of the dynamic of a relationship here, it's a relationship. It's just the moving of the energy and you can't really plan for that or understand how that's going to shift, but it's just a different in the level of focus and where the energy is moving. And having that extra piece just, gives you that deeper sense of, oh, okay, cool. All of these things are normal. Because, that's that's one of the fears that we all have. It's just is this wrong? Is this abnormal? Is this how it's not meant to be? And then when you have the support people around you, it's just yeah, this is what happens. It's normal. And as soon as you hear that something's normal, you're just So having that support network in, every area of your life becomes important. And that's why, the people who go to church have better relationships. They have, make more money. It's like they've just got a support network around them. And people, I think people, especially in personal development, you're sold on the idea of, you become the 5 people you hang around the most, but it becomes more of a shaming tool. It's like, oh, okay, cool. I've got to remove that person from my life entirely. It's this mechanism where people use it as an exclusive thing rather than an inclusive thing. And they, instead of curating people that you want to be around and consciously putting more time into things, people are just like, oh, throw money at the people that you want to be around.
Yeah.
And I think there's definitely, some shadow patterns there that play out. And, when you can come back to being like, okay, well, I'm going to put the time into the people that I want to hang around the most, and I'm going to cultivate the relationships that I want to hang around the most. So, yeah, what do you think on that?
I think it's important.
I was more talking about the coaching industry.
Yeah,
piece.
I see what you're speaking to. I'll reflect back when I first heard that, I had whatever experience I did. And then years later, I was like, these 5 people I'm spending the most time with are actually my family. It's not my friends. And just what that means, and also what it means to move towards, I don't know, the kind of people we do want to be with. And I still love my family. When I moved out of home, that probably changed how much time I was spending with them. It was circumstantial, which is okay. But I think there's a thing for me in peers. And I remember back in the days, I used to be a photographer, and I had a good friend from high school that was also a photographer. And this guy had no issues being out there, networking, meeting, assisting. I was intimidated by, professional photographers, and he was out there, that's what he was doing with his free time. I was like, I could never do this. And it kind of dawned on me, I do not love photography as much as he does. If I'm not willing to work through the stuff, I've got this word language for it now, I didn't back then. It was just like, no, it's too scary. For me, this was a hobby that I'm not even exceptionally good at. I can, if you show me a brief, I can deliver on it. But I was like, I do not have the drive to improve the way he does and to be spending time in the communities he does. And that's why now he's photographed for, famous, whatever. I don't want to name names because I don't know which ones, but big magazines that we all know.
Yeah.
And he's living in London, and he's paved that way for himself. And I look at the same way. So I just got my CSP this weekend, certified. So if anyone doesn't know, it's a designation, global designation held by less than 10% of the world's professional speakers in global organizations. As the top tier of the industry, rigorous process you have to go, all that kind of stuff. And when I first got it, I didn't think much of it. I was on my to-do list. I'm like, good, I ticked it off. After, Christmas, New Year's, I slowed down, and there was quite a feeling of gratitude. I'm like, oh, this is actually an achievement, Miroslav. This isn't a thing you just ticked off because it's work. And, there was a bit of tears, and there was a slowing down. And then this weekend was a gala where we did the awards night, and during the awards night, they gave me the award. And it was beautiful to be recognized by my peers externally. And some of these people, they founded the Professional Speakers Association of Australia 36, 37 years ago. I'm like, these are titans in the industry. They've been doing this inside this association longer than I've been alive. And it was really humbling to have them go you've made it to a certain degree. And then after that, they did this funny thing where they made a line, and off the stage, there was a line on either side, and they put their hands up and made a tunnel. And then those of us that got awarded our CSPs, which was 8 of us or something, we all went through the tunnel, and they all cheered us as they were doing it.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how much joy this filled me with. It's yes, all the formalities were nice, but actually feeling their love and support, I'm like, this is changing something for me on a chemical, biological level that I can't even understand. I feel the acceptance of this. And also the shift inside that ecosystem, I'm I felt their love, acceptance, generosity towards me open up to a different level. Everyone is really loving and friendly inside the organization, but there was a sense of peerhood that happened that allowed me to express more love with them as well. There was a few people where I was logically I knew I liked them, but I'm no, I have to tell this person I love them and I want to spend more time with them. And it's it was a moment, and it was okay, I'm going to choose to voice this. And it was a moment of trust, but it also came naturally. It's I I can't hold this back when I've been accepted to this level. So I don't think I'm answering your question at all, but I think I'm definitely vouching for what happens and how naturally it happens when we're following our genuine, authentic desires to tie up some of these things. It's like we don't have to try to push people in and pull people, do the in and out thing. It's like as we're walking towards it, we're going to have the conversations we need to have. And that ecosystem is going to change to support us to whatever the next stage looks like for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think there was one of the key things that you said in there, with the other photographer, you recognize you didn't have the same drive as him to improve. And Csikszentmihalyi, the person who coined the term flow, basically talked about this being like the autotelic experience, where what that means is you basically, the purpose of the activity becomes the activity. That's what we get into flow. It's like for you speaking, the purpose of the activity is the activity. It's to speak. And when you do that, it just becomes easy. Like you're not going to let all of the bullshit of that industry actually weigh you down like it did with photography, because it's like, it's not what you're actually here for. When you're actually doing the thing that you're here for, it becomes the activity that you're doing becomes the purpose. You just keep doing it. It becomes an extension of you. It becomes this expression of you that just, breathes through you the entire time. And most people are too busy trying to force things or living out their parents' lives or doing all of the things that look good to society rather than the things that light them up the most. And that was like the perfect experience of the difference between when you're being a photographer to when you're being a speaker. So it was amazing to be able to see that reflection. What as we start to wrap up for today, what's for aspiring speakers out there or professional speakers out there, if you had one message for them, what would it be?
Do it because you love it and the money will come. And let me just like paint in the story a little bit. So for me, and someone just asked me this recently, I had a period where I was teaching yoga for 5 or 6 years. And for a period, I was resenting that. I'm like, this is not what I'm here for. And I don't know what stage of that 5-6 year journey, but at some point I'm like, no, this is exactly where I need to be. I'm learning in this moment exactly what I'm going to need for a future, even though I knew my future was in speaking and later training speakers as well. And it was like, can I accept the gratitude of what I'm doing right here? Because I'm collecting resources that it's very unlikely any other speaker is going to have. And this for me is the magic. And, yesterday I watched the Australian keynote speaker of the year, or a couple of days ago, deliver his keynote. And half the keynote was about his time working as a chef. And I'm like, and this is like anytime something goes wrong or bad or good in your life, like these are the stories you're going to be sharing as a speaker. And to recognize that there is no wrong or bad, it's like you just have to keep saying yes to life and knowing that as you move through whatever's going through, that's going to be the resource that you share. And the second thing that's really important for me as well is that I recognized I loved the process more than the result. Like people say you should do this. I'm like, no, I do this. And I was running retreats at one point. So I was teaching yoga, I'd run workshops, and at one point I was like, no, I need to be in this more deeply, more often. And I started running retreats, and the way I was doing it, this is crazy, not a business move. Cody would never teach you this. I would sell the retreats at $100 to book, and then at the end of the retreat, you pay whatever you want. The $100 would basically cover some of my expenses, so I knew I could run it, and anything that people wanted to give at the end was a bonus. Not very lucrative. There's definitely like sales stuff that, we can teach to make a lot more money in that and that I did apply later. But for me, the sense was like, as long as I'm in this environment, I'm learning. And all of that stuff is the fruit that I'm doing now on a much bigger stage and it's creating a much bigger impact. So it's like, don't just dream about the bigger stages. Go after the stages you can get. Make yourself uncomfortable about the ones that you do have desire for and start having the conversations.
Love it. Perfect. I think that's the perfect thing to wrap up on. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.